My name is Ioanna Trafalis, and I work for the Athens Institute for Education and Research, which is our World Association for Academics and Researchers. We have started a new initiative of interviewing the participants which attend our many conferences in Athens present their work. Today I have the pleasure of interviewing Dr. Terry Parssinen, professor at the University of Tampa, the USA. Hello, Dr. Parssinen.
Hi, Joanna.
Welcome to Athens and welcome to our series of
Well,
interviews.
thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you here. So I'd like to begin with your presentation at Honors Conference. You present the paper titled, How Americans Learned About the Risks of Smoking. Tell us a few words about it.
What I really looked at was the period between 1950 and 1964 as scientific medical information rolled out, literally in the technical press, about the dangers of cigarette smoking, particularly linking it to lung cancer. But what I was interested in is the way in which that was translated from the technical press into the popular press, and then from there into the popular understanding. And what I found is extremely effective and very, very interesting. As early as 1954, the majority of Americans were aware of what they called the cigarette controversy. And by 1964, just 14 years after it had begun, the Surgeon General's report of that year really sort of closed the cap on that. There was no debate, no serious debate after that period.
Mm-hmm. So why did that happen?
Well, it happened because of in the period of the 1940s, there was a skyrocketing incidence of lung cancer. I mean, 30 years before that, lung cancer had been unknown. There just was almost nothing. But the correlation between the vast increase in smoking, mostly by American males, and lung cancer in American men got some physicians and scientists thinking, gee, I wonder if there's a correlation here. Now, you don't have to be a genius to think there might be a correlation between taking cigarette smoke into your lungs and the development of lung cancer. It took anywhere between 25 and 30 years for that early age smoking to finally manifest itself in lung cancer. But when it did, it was really very, very virulent. People hadn't seen anything like that.
Mm-hmm. So now the amount of people that smoke has decreased a lot in the U.S., I suppose.
It has. It reached its height at about 44%. That's of all adults, male as well as female. Among men it was higher. And today it's down to about 18%.
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously you'd like to see it at 0% because
Yes.
it remains such a terrible health risk.
Mm-hmm.
But we haven't gotten there. There has been, ever since the 1970s, a very slow, persistent decline. We reached 20% a few years ago, now we're at 18%. I'm not sure whether we're ever going to be able to make it obliterated, but the fact that it's fallen by 2/3 has saved an enormous amount of lives. I mean, typically in the 50s and 60s, something like 400,000 people died of smoking disease. So it was a really, really devastating disease that was of epidemic proportions.
Smoking is also a big issue in Greece. There's big amounts of people that smoke.
Really?
Yes. Do you have any suggestions that could help with this issue?
Well,
With your experience?
that's a tough habit to break. I mean,
Yes.
both literally and figuratively, because it's a highly addictive substance. One of the Surgeon General's reports said this is as addictive as heroin in terms of difficulty of breaking it. So the things that mattered most in terms of the fall of smoking incidents in the United States had to do with a series of reports showing that there was secondhand smoke. In other words, if you and I were living together and I was smoking and you were not, the chances that I would get lung cancer would be high, but there would also be an increased incidence of the possibility of your getting sick from that. So what that did was for people to say, wait a minute, you're not just hurting yourself, you're hurting everybody around you, and we're not going to let you smoke in the workplace, we're not going to let you smoke in restaurants, on airplanes, etc. And what happened then was, as it became more and more difficult for smokers to find a place in public to smoke, is they had a kind of pariah status. That is, eventually people said, are you too weak to stop smoking? And the incidence of smoking went down as a result of these prohibitions.
Mm-hmm.
But those have to be government edicts. They have to come from the top down. And if the government is not adamant about that, they're just going to go on smoking.
Yes, that's the issue in Greece because there are laws that don't allow smoking, but
Really?
people still smoke in public places,
Yeah.
even though there are laws.
Well, that
So
really
it's really
is a problem.
difficult.
Yeah.
Yes.
I will say this, in America, smoking used to take place across the whole range of the population, rich people, poor people, educated people, not educated. Now it's really changed dramatically, so that it correlates directly, inversely, to income level and education level. In other words, the more income you have, the higher your education level, that's the critical one, the less likely you are to smoke. And in fact, Dr. Papanikos said today, you know, how many people in here smoke? One woman out of maybe 40 people raised her hands. And that's exactly what I would have expected. But in places where poor people gather, it's much more common, unfortunately.
So tell us a few things about yourself, your studies, your career, and whatever else you would like to add.
I call myself a one-trick pony. I'm very, very good at being a history professor and not very good at anything else. So I was always good at history. I went right from being an undergraduate history major to graduate school and got my PhD at age 26 and already had begun teaching before that. So this is I'm about to start my 52nd year as a history professor. And I've loved every minute of it. I can't believe that I've made it through adult life reading, writing, and talking about history books. What could be better than that from my perspective? And fortunately, I'm in a university where we have no mandatory retirement age, so as long as I continue to do well, according to the dean, I'm continued to allow to teach. And at 75, I think I'm the oldest history professor, the oldest professor at my university, but I'll just keep on going until I fall over one day.
It's very nice. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
So what's your current major area of research?
Well, I thought about this a lot. I've written a couple of books about the history of narcotic drugs and a few articles. And then I stopped. I got bored with that, so I wrote a book about World War II. But now I'm rekindling my interest. I think I'm going to write a book about the history of the cigarette. At first I thought I'd do something on the history of tobacco as a whole, but that just turned out to be too big, too unwieldy. The history of the cigarette, which was really only invented in the early to mid-19th century. So my specialty is European history in the 19th and 20th centuries. That kind of fits into that, so I think that's where I'm going to go with it.
What makes you so interested in the history of the cigarette?
Well, first of all, there are a lot of methodological similarities between writing about the history of narcotic drugs and the history of the cigarette. They're both plants, they're refined, they're shipped around the world, they have addictive qualities, they try to be regulated by governments, so there are a lot of things that are transferable in terms of methodology from one topic to another. And then, as I said, what's happened in America is as the rate of smoking has declined, it has increased in third world areas. So that places like Africa, in China, in other parts of Asia, the smoking rates have increased dramatically. And you know what they smoke? They smoke Marlboros. Everybody wants to be a Marlboro man. So they've got this image of, the American cowboy, this is the tough guy smoking cigarettes. And now what we're going to see is an increase very dramatically as lung cancer afflicts those people that began smoking 30 years ago. So this is going to be an ongoing public health issue, not just in America anymore, in Europe where it's going down, but in the entire world.
So do you think there's going to be the same thing with America? Like it's just going to make the same cycle, or how do you?
Well, it's hard to know exactly how that's going to work out, but I think that there will be, in the very broadest terms, something very similar. That is, you'll have educated people in every country realizing the health consequences of smoking are so terrible. They will try to convince the government to move by prohibiting smoking in certain areas, raising the taxes on cigarettes and other effective means. They'll meet some resistance. Often it will be supported by tobacco company money, etc. But they'll also meet resistance from people who are heavily addicted and don't want to believe that their health is compromised by this. So the same kind of struggle that played out in America between 1950 and say 2000, that will play out in other parts of the globe as it happens. But believe it or not, now you can't smoke in a bar in Paris, or in Ireland. I mean, these are places that I thought when I was younger, they'll never stop smoking in places like that. They did eventually, to everybody's surprise.
So there's hope for Greece as well.
Yeah, hope for Greece as well, you're right.
So how were you introduced to Athner, and what made you attend the conference?
Yeah, that's a great question. I have been getting emails about Athner conferences for a while, 5, 6, 7 years, something like that. And I looked at them. I love Athens. I've been here once before, and so I thought, gee, that would be fun to be back in Athens again. But by that time, at that time, I didn't really have a paper to present that I thought was adequate. By this time, about a year ago or so, I thought, you know what, I've got a paper here, I'd like to put it out on the road and see how people respond to it. So the last time I got an email, it would have been, I think, July or something like that. So I responded and suggested this, and the paper topic was accepted. And it's been wonderful to be in this situation. We've been very happy.
It's been very nice to have you as well.
Thank you.
So tell us about the status of the higher educational system in America, since you've been a professor for such a long time as well. And what do you think are the advantages and disadvantages?
I love that question. And give me a little more time on this than some of the others.
Yes, of course.
I think the great advantage of the higher education system in America is its mass and its complexity. We have everything from Harvard and Yale down to community colleges at the local level. It's a system that you can get into at various levels depending on your income and age and other things. And at the upper level, I mean, the quality of the education at the upper level of our system is, I think, unparalleled anyplace else in the world. And the way in which this is reflected is the huge and increasing number of students from around the world who want to come to study in the United States. My university, which has a total population, student population, of 8,500, so that makes it a medium level sized institution. About 15% of our students are international. Now, it varies from place to place, but that's indicative of how the United States educational institutions have welcomed international students. So that's, I think, been really the great strength, the thing that I'm proudest of our system. On the downside, 40 or 50 years ago, the state legislatures contributed very heavily to state universities. So poor students could go to college for not exactly next to nothing, but not very high tuition payments. That has not disappeared, but it's been dramatically cut back. So the tuitions have gone up really to very high levels, and students are now taking that responsibility by having to take student loans to pay for their tuition. So at my university, now we're a private university, students come out with a debt load of $20,000, $30,000, $40,000. Well, when you've got a bachelor's degree, that's great, but you're going to haul that $40,000 debt load around until you're in your 40s yourself. So it's really puts it's in my view a very unfair transfer of the cost of higher education from the state, which benefits by it, to the students, and it really can be very difficult for some students to even attend college under those circumstances. We used to be the country that graduated the highest number of students in a certain age group. We've now slipped to about 9th or 10th, and that's not good.
Yes, but the advantages are more than the disadvantages.
Well, I think so. I mean, I fortunately I'm so old that I came out with no debt whatsoever. My parents paid most of it, and then I had a small scholarship that helped. And when I was in college in the 1960s, that was pretty much the norm. Now I see these young people coming out with significant debt burdens, and I think that's a problem. As they are, as individuals, trying to make their way through the world, that means they can't buy a house very readily. They've got student loans to pay off, so they have to take certain higher paying jobs and lesser paying jobs that might benefit society as a whole. Like being a teacher, no, they've got to go and be a banker or something, if you see what I mean. So I think that it's unfortunate for the United States as a society to do what we've done. But we'll struggle through some way or another.
Okay, thank you very much.
It's been my pleasure. Thanks for the great...